good to be with Gospel Community Church. Thank you for having me for these 5 weeks. I've endeavored, perhaps poorly, to give you kind of a cross section of the Psalms, and there's no way to do justice to all the Psalms in 5 weeks. They are an amazing book in the Bible. There's 150 of them, as you know, so we've done our best maybe to give you a different feel for different kinds of Psalms and maybe rekindle your love for the Psalms. This is the Songbook of Israel. One ancient writer said the Psalms give us an anatomy of all the parts of the soul. So when we're preaching Psalms, we're not preaching Romans or Matthew or even Acts or anything like that. We're really preaching to the congregation of the faithful. And so when I'm preaching out of Psalms, I'm thinking, as Christians, what is the word that God has for us that will enable us to understand life as a Christian, understand God as Christians should understand him, and how this pans out in our day-to-day living. So most of these Psalms are going to be that way. There's just going to be a lot about experience, and so I hope you understand that this is one section of the Bible. It's not like every other book in the Bible, where especially in the New Testament, you get to the letters, you get a whole different feel for God's truth. His truth is so magnificent that we can never just delve into it in just a few weeks. Anyway, so we started out with Psalm 40. We tried to look at a messianic psalm talking about how Christ came and he had to come in a body in order to redeem men and women. He had to have a human nature and a body you have given to me, and so on and so forth. We looked at that psalm. Then we looked at a regal psalm, Psalm 45, about Christ marrying the church and the bride coming in with all the train behind and him putting the ring on, and how we are married to Christ and that intimate relationship. We talked about Psalm 73, where the author is giving the congregation who are struggling with contentment, trying to give him a perspective that will enable them to go through life as we look at people around us who are prospering and yet are the Barabbas lovers. They're evil and yet they prosper. And the psalmist, in a long, drawn-out way, in a very good way, I should say, takes us through the feelings of this man who is jealous and anxious and why he's suffering and the ungodly are prospering. And then God finally turns his heart and his mind to the sanctuary of the Lord, and he saw the end of the evil, and now suddenly everything came into perspective. The Christian life is so much about perspective. It's about how do you look at not just how you're feeling today, but the big picture, not only of your life, but of the redemptive plan all the way from eternity past to the new city, the new Jerusalem. You've got to always look at the big picture in order to sense where you're at in this storyline, so that you can adjust and so that you can deal with what's going on in your life. I mean, having plumbing problems like I did this week are so insignificant when I look at the big picture. But if I concentrate just on the flooding, I'm going to get discouraged. So Psalm 73 and other Psalms help me with that. Then, of course, we looked at Psalm 107 last week. And Psalm 107 is one of my favorites, and he gives these pictures of what it is to understand the loving kindness, the chesed of the Lord. We looked at that last week, and we went through those paintings, those murals, that in all these different situations, it's the loving kindness, the understanding God's loving kindness for his own that enables us to get through life. And the loving kindness of the Lord is not some soft sentimentality, God giving us a saccharine sweet indulgence because we're his children. No, rather, God gives us tough times in order that we might become more like his Son, Jesus Christ. And so we looked at some of these scenarios, and last week at Psalm 107, we saw that to be the case. This morning, I'll ask you to open up to the psalm for this morning, Psalm 121. Psalm 121, you probably are somewhat familiar with this psalm. It's only 8 verses long, and I'm going to give a little bit of a background on what this psalm is, and kind of the larger context of what kind of psalm it is. Then we'll start to get into the text a little bit. So if you turn in your Bible, if you have one, or you can just listen, let me read it for you. This is, of course, out of the ESV. It says, "A song of ascents. I lift up my eyes to the hills. From where does my help come? My help comes from the Lord who made heaven and earth. He will not let your foot be moved. He who keeps you will not slumber. Behold, he who keeps Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. The Lord is your keeper. The Lord is your shade on your right hand. The sun shall not strike you by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord will keep you from all evil. He will keep your life. The Lord will keep your going out and your coming in from this time forth and forevermore." You notice that the intro, the superscription on this psalm says a song of ascents. The old King James used to say a song of degrees. That's got nothing to do with graduating from high school. It means these are songs about stepping upwards, moving in an upward direction. That's what these Song of Ascents are about. Now, what were they? Well, there are 15 psalms in our Psalter from Psalm 120 to 134, 15 of them. They're all listed, if you look at your Bible, as songs of ascent. They're all brought together. That doesn't mean that that somebody sat down and wrote 15 psalms and put them together. I think what happened was that the ancient Jewish church, quote unquote, put these psalms together because they were very suitable to people who were going up to Jerusalem during the feast days. And as they were ascending to Jerusalem and seeing the glorious eternal city in the background, they would comfort themselves as they're walking up to Jerusalem from all different parts of the country of Israel, and they would sing these songs as they were going. And so they would comfort themselves with these songs of ascent. Each one of them has a little bit different focus or theme to it. I think you would notice that in this particular psalm, maybe you noticed it, maybe you didn't, the key word is the word keeps. It's a Hebrew word shamar, or shomer if you want the noun, but that's irrelevant. But let me just review for you the fact that the word keeps, as loving kindness was in Psalm 107, the key word here is keeps. Let me read verse 3. He who keeps you will not slumber. Verse 4, behold, he who keeps Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. Verse 5, the Lord is your keeper. Verse 7, the Lord will keep you from all evil. He will keep your life. And then verse 8, the Lord will keep your going out and your coming in from this time and forevermore. So this psalm has something to do with the keeping power of the Lord, Yahweh, the eternal covenant God, over his people. And this would be a great, great comfort to the people who are going up to Jerusalem. Now, I don't know if you know too much about the geography of the area. I did one of these things on YouTube yesterday where the guy's walking around with a camera and walking towards Jerusalem. And it's fascinating that Jerusalem is situated kind of on the northwest corner of the Dead Sea, about 30 or 40 kilometers inland, and it's in a mountainous area. At least for that area, it's mountainous, nothing compared to the mountains we have here. But no matter what direction you're going in, especially from the east, where where it's essentially desert, or from the west, where you're coming from the alluvial plain of the Mediterranean, you're always going up to Jerusalem. That's why in the parable of the Good Samaritan, it says the guy was going down to Jericho, because when you're leaving Jerusalem, you're always going downhill. And that also means that as you're going to Jerusalem, the thing that you're always looking for are those mountains in the distance. I remember when I first came out to Colorado, I was very ignorant. I came from New York State, never been out west. And I remember when I got to Kansas, I'm looking for the mountains. I said, I got to see the Rocky Mountains. And I was nowhere even near the Rocky Mountains because I didn't realize you had to be a lot closer than that. Well, that's the idea here. The songs of ascent were sung by the Jewish people that were going to these feasts and festivals in Jerusalem. And as they were going, they were singing to God these hymns of praise and adoration and thanksgiving and so on. You'll also notice that in the text itself are many references to people that are in walking, that are in some kind of they're walking to a destination. They're pilgrims, they're sojourners, etc. You will not let your foot be moved. Talks about the sun and the moon and keeping the people that are walking from all evil. All of these things would have been great threats to people who were walking to Jerusalem. Remember, they didn't have vehicles. They didn't have all kinds of protective gear. They didn't have a lot of things that we have to protect us, and basically they were unarmed. So people that were going to these feasts in Jerusalem had a lot of potential enemies at their behest that were standing right before them. You had muggers, you had the climate, you had all kinds of other things, animals and so on and so forth, that could waylay your journey or actually prevent you from getting there. So these Psalms 120 to 134, we call those songs of ascent, and they were sung as the pilgrims were entering Jerusalem. You'll also notice, maybe, if you have read through Psalms 120 to 134, the focus of these Psalms are always around the city of Jerusalem. Now remember, in the Old Testament, when you have city of Jerusalem, which I'll explain in just a second, and things like Mount Zion or the hills or the tents in Psalm 120 or the house of the Lord in Psalm 121 or the testimony of Israel, Psalm 122 verse 4, all of these things are figures of speech to the place that God dwells. We call this metonymy, if you want the actual English word for the figure of speech. For example, let me give you an example of metonymy. If we say something like, today the White House said such and such and such and such, or we might say something like, Hollywood hasn't put out a good movie in 5 years. See, we're using the words White House or Hollywood because it's associated with what it's really trying to get at, is that the president and the directors and the producers in Hollywood. But it uses a word that is connected to what's really being said to kind of give us a way of, an emotional way of panning down or digging down deep into the meaning. So it's a figure of speech. So when he says something like Mount Zion, he's not necessarily talking about Mount Zion. You see that, for example, in Psalm 125, verse 1, 132, verse 13. He's talking about Mount Zion as representative of where God dwells. That was one of the hills in Jerusalem. He talks about the hills. Again, why the hills? Because that's where God dwells, and so on and so forth. So just understand that there's a lot of figures of speech going on in these 15 Psalms that if you don't understand what he's getting at, you'll take it hyper literally and you'll miss the point. There's a lot there's a lot of debate has been going on for many years about how to look at the Old Testament literally, and a lot of us have taken a lot of heat because we say literal interpretation of the Old Testament is not a wooden translation of exactly what the word is, but it's the genre of the literature, and what the author intended that word to mean is the way you interpret it. So again, when you see Mount Zion, he's not talking specifically about a mountain. He's talking about Mount Zion being the place of God's dwelling. That would be the only reason they would go to Jerusalem in the first place, not to visit a mountain. So all these Psalms are about this pilgrimage, this sojourn from all parts of the empire going to Jerusalem to meet with God. So they would sing these Psalms. So I'll do something that's probably going to surprise you. This is how it might have sounded. Esai nai el heharim me'ayim yavo esri me'im Adonai Ose shamayim va'aretz El yatein lamot raneka El yanum shomreka Hine lo yanum V'lo ishan shomer Israel, I lift up my eyes unto the hills. From whence shall come my help? My help is from the Lord God, maker of heaven and earth. He will not give to the moving of your foot, nor shall slumber he who keeps thee. Behold, he'll not slumber, nor will he sleep. He who keeps Israel. Now that wasn't the tune that they would have sang it to. That's Michael Card's rendition of it. But it gives you an idea that these were sung. And in the singing, there's something about singing that moves the spirit in ways that prose and just normal conversation can't do. And so as they're walking and they're worried about all these potential threats, they're singing to the Lord who is their keeper. Psalm 121. Now, wouldn't that be a great comfort if you have a band of Jews, say a couple hundred people, and they're all singing to the only one who can keep them from all the dangers that surround them. And that's what they would do. So when you read this psalm, put yourself back into the culture in which it was written. Then after that, you can make application to yourself. So this was that's the focus of the psalm. They're looking to the hills, they're looking to the place where God dwells. They can't wait to meet with God. A lot of figure of speech, and it was sung as they were going up to Jerusalem, okay? This is a cry of hope. The mountains are where God dwells. Now, I got to admit, when I first used to read this psalm, and it said, I would lift up my eyes to the hills, from whence come my help. And of course, living in Colorado, I was looking to the hills as, oh, well, God created the mountains. Therefore, in seeing the creative power of God, that's where my help is going to come from. It's going to come from the creative power of God that produced and created those mountains. But that's really not what is being said here. He's basically saying, I'm lifting up my eyes to the hills the hills where God's sacred, eternal city is, the place where God dwells. So it's very spatial. So again, as they're going along, they're walking many miles, 50, 100, 150 miles, whatever it might have been, and they can't wait to see those hills in the distance. That shows that Jerusalem is getting closer. So anyway, so it's a cry of hope, I just want to insert that looking to God is always the right thing for us to do as the saints of God. We see, again, in some of these other Psalms of Ascent, we see Psalm 123, verse 1. Remember, it's Psalm 120 to Psalm 134. I'll keep mentioning that just so you remember. Unto you I lift up my eyes, O you who dwell in the heavens. You see, the same idea. You get the same thing in Psalm 87, which is not a Psalm of Ascent, about looking to Christ. I'm thinking of Hebrews 12, looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith. When you're starting to feel like you're losing it, that you're doubting, that you're discouraged, that you feel sin is taking hold of you, whatever it might be, you're not bold enough. What is the answer? It's always looking to the place where God dwells. Not looking to the mountains, not looking to the valleys or the rivers, because that doesn't really help you, but looking to where God dwells, that's what helps you. And so if you're a Christian today, my application early is always look to the one who is seated in the heavens and has you at heart. He is your keeper. If you're a Christian this morning, what better keeper could you ever want? So again, the word keep is 6 times in the Psalm. We just mentioned that. By the way, it's very interesting. I did a word study. It's a very common word, by the way. Almost in every case up until the Psalms, the word keep, as you might suspect, is used for what? Keeping the commandments, keeping the law. That's another usage of the word. But suddenly when you get into the Psalms, the word keep has reference to God's keeping his people. Let me read you some instances of that, just so you know that this is exactly what the author is getting at. I found one instance in the Pentateuch, that's the first 5 books of the Bible, where the word keep was God keeping somebody. This is Jacob talking to his uncle. Then Jacob made a vow saying, if God will be with me and will keep me in this word. This is Genesis 28, 20 and 21. Keep me in the way that I shall go. I will give, and will give me bread to eat and clothing to wear, so that I come again to my father's house in peace. Then the Lord shall be my God. But the rest of the historical books in the Pentateuch, the word keep is never used that way. But then you get to the Psalms. Psalm 12, verse 7. You, O Lord, will keep them, that is his saints. You will guard us from this generation forever. Psalm 16, verse 1. Preserve. Now again, that's the word, same word, they just changed the English word. Preserve me, O God, for in you I take refuge. Psalm 25, 20. O guard my souls. Yeah, they translate this word differently in the English, but it's all the same word. Oh, guard my soul and deliver me. Let me not be put to shame, for I take refuge in you. Psalm 34, verse 20. He keeps all of his bones. Not one of them is broken. Talking about the saints. Psalm 97, verse 10. Oh, you who loves the Lord, hate evil. He preserves the lives of his saints and delivers them from the hand of the wicked. Isn't that comforting? God is preserving you, saint. And if he's preserving you, you cannot be destroyed. Psalm 116, verse 6. O Lord, preserves the simple. Talking about the poor, which is what we are. When I was brought low, he saved me. Psalm 145, verse 20. The Lord preserves all those who love him, but all the wicked he will destroy. Psalm 146, verse 9. The Lord watches over the sojourners. By the way, the word watches is the same word. He upholds the widow and the fatherless, but the way of the wicked he brings to ruin. See, it's interesting that in the Psalms, this word means God's keeping power over his people. That's why we need to have the whole Bible, because you wouldn't have gotten this unless we had the psalmody. So the application is obvious. If you're a believer today, God is keeping you all the days of your life. And we're going to look a little bit about how that now pans out as we look at the text. How does God keep us? Well, first of all, how doesn't God keep us, right? Surely it doesn't mean God keeps us by keeping all trials out of our lives. That's not how God keeps us. I don't know if you remember last week, Psalm 107, in a couple of those scenarios, one of them, it says that they were burdened, they were enslaved, and he actually made their burden heavier so that they would cry out to him. In the Mariner sequence, which is the next section, he said that God actually is the one who rose up the waves and put the waves down, much like in the book of Jonah. God does not pamper us. That's not what keeping is all about. This is an ultimate kind of keeping. But if you're a Christian today, don't think that God is going to make your life easy and that's equivalent to him keeping you. No. Surely keeping is not preserving you from temporal harm. Surely it's not preserving you from some of the hardest trials that people have ever tried to endure. Therefore, the keeping has to be something far more comprehensive and far deeper. And it is. It's the keeping of the saint for eternity in an ultimate sense. He will keep your soul and never let you go. Through many dangers and toils and snares, said Newton, I have already come. It is grace that's brought me safe thus far, and grace will lead me home. Newton's not saying grace has made everything easy. He's saying grace has brought me safe. I haven't abandoned the faith. I haven't ultimately forsaken Christ, has brought me safe thus far. And grace will get me all the way to the end. That's what this psalm is about. So how is God able to keep us? Well, let's read it. I lift up my eyes to the hills. Again, some say that Jerusalem is on 7 hills. Other people say it's 4. Their hills they're not mountains like we know. They're rounded off protrusions. But in any event, if you look at Jerusalem, you ever do one of maybe some of you have been there. There's several hills. You probably have heard of Mount Zion. You probably have heard of Mount Moriah. So anyway, I lift my eyes to the hills. From whence does my help come? And the answer to that is from God. That's why you're looking to the hills. And the answer is that in verse 2, my help comes from Yahweh, literally, who made heaven and earth. How does God keep us? Number 1, he keeps us because he's eminently able to keep. If he has created the heavens and the earth, then why can't he keep the saint? If he created all that we know with but a word, then you think keeping you is a difficulty beyond his understanding or his capacity? Of course not. That's why they say he created the heavens, or made heaven and earth. In Psalm 124, which is again another song of ascent, which shows you that these are linked together, maybe by the same author. Some of these are written by David. They think David's a scribe. Psalm 121 is not in that number, but it could have been written by David. But look at Psalm 124, verse 8. It's almost exactly verbatim. Our help is in the name of the Lord who made heaven and earth. So again, the idea behind these psalms are all about the same. God is the one that's able to keep us as we're going to Jerusalem on this long and dangerous trek. So he's able to keep us. He protects us from grievous falls. Look at verse 3. He will not let your foot be moved. He who keeps you will not slumber. Now again, put this in the context of somebody walking through the valleys of the shadow of death and ravines, and they didn't have paved highways. There was no interstate system. So the chance of somebody slipping and falling down or falling off a cliff, remember, they didn't have basketball, so we can't use that illustration, although we had that recently. But yeah, you could easily fall down. And so he uses that illustration to say that God will never let your foot be moved. Now you remember, I hope, Psalm 73 is where the psalmist was struggling several weeks ago when we talked about this. And if you remember in verse 2, it says, but as for me, my feet had almost stumbled, my steps had nearly slipped. So this is an illustration or a metaphor. Slipping is moving away from the reality of your relationship with God and falling away or falling down. And he's saying that the Lord Yahweh will not let your foot be moved. As you're walking to Jerusalem, as we're walking on this trek or this sojourn called the Christian life, where Peter says we're strangers and sojourners, God will never allow you to fall ultimately away. That should give you great comfort. The God that created will not let you slip and fall. Now, will he let you trip, stub your toe, bang your knee, break your wrist? Of course. But he will never make it so you can't continue the journey. He will not let your foot be moved. He who keeps you will not slumber. Not only will he not let your foot be moved, he is always awake. Again, this would be something that would be fully understandable to the crowd of that day. For who is the most important person in a city when people are coming in droves? It would be the sentinel. A sentinel is merely a guard on the perimeter of the city. So he's saying that he will never slumber nor sleep. And so the greatest sin that can be committed by anybody who is commissioned to guard a city would be to fall asleep. And men do that. We do that from time to time. We get sleepy, Ephesians 4, oh sleeper, and Christ will give you light, and so on. But God never does. He never falls asleep. I was reading some instances of, I didn't know how serious a deal this was, falling asleep. Now, I'm on a Lincoln kick lately, so I found this illustration. Lincoln had to pardon a guy, Private William Scott, Company K, the 3rd Regiment of Vermont Volunteers. This is the note of pardon, by the way, from Lincoln. They were going to kill this guy. Having been found guilty by court-martial of sleeping on his post while a sentinel or a picket guard. Now, he was surrounding Washington, D.C. Nothing ever came of it. He just fell asleep and they found him. But this is how serious they took it. He has been sentenced to be shot, and the sentence has been approved and ordered to be executed. The commanding officers of the brigade, the regiment, and the company, the command, together with many other privates and officers of his regiment, have earnestly appealed to the Major General commanding to spare the life of the offender. And the President of the United States, that is Lincoln, has expressed a wish that as this is the first condemnation to death in this army for this crime, mercy may be extended to the criminal. And it goes on. This guy was eventually pardoned. The point I'm trying to make is that this is a serious sin, error in the military to fall asleep at your post. I was reading another article that talked about a guy by the name of John F. Parker. John F. Parker was the guard at the Ford's Theater who was supposed to be sitting and protecting Lincoln the night he was shot to death, and he had abandoned his post. He never stood trial. They never actually went after him. But the point is, how important it is, especially in a city in this day and age, to fall asleep at your post when there is so much danger lurking about, right? The psalmist wants you to know that God is a sentry on the post watching your life, and he never slumbers nor sleeps. He knows all the dangers that are coming into your life potentially. He sees every crevice, every marauder, every robber. He sees everything that might come into your life, and he's watching carefully, and he never falls asleep on the job and says, oops, I didn't mean that to happen to Rick, but I just happened not to be awake that period. No, that never happens. You should know, I should know, we should apply this to our lives, that as Christians, God always is looking out for us. He sees the future. He sees today. He sees tomorrow. He sees the next day. He knows exactly the day that you're going to get sick. He knows exactly the day that your kid's going to get sick. He sees exactly the day that you're going to lose your job or get your job. He sees exactly the day that you're going to have your ultimate final disease and die. He sees it all, and he has it all carefully constructed for your good, because he's a sentry who cannot sleep. That's because he's God. He will neither slumber nor sleep. He says it twice, verse 3 and in verse 4. I know, sometimes we think, where was God when that happened? You ever ask that question? I have. Didn't God see that coming? Didn't he know it was the worst time of my life to have this trial hit me? Didn't he know that this event is hurting a lot of other people? Oh, whatever the excuse might be. This says he never slumbers nor sleeps, and as a believer, he's always watching out for you, as if you were the last person in the world. If that doesn't bring you comfort, nothing else will. And that's why they're singing this song. Because they know it's dangerous, but they know they have something far greater than any danger. And his name is Yahweh. And then also, how does God keep? He always looks at the big picture. In other words, God is always in the business of keeping you from those things that might really hurt you, rather than the little things that are just part of living in grace. So, all of us have, and if you're young, you will have more and more of this. God is going to allow things to happen in your lives that aren't, quote, good. You don't seem as good. But he'll never let the ultimate destruction happen in your life. And I want you to notice what he says in verse 6. The sun shall not strike you by day, nor the moon by night. Now I have to ask you, if you're in a desert area, which anything to the east of Jerusalem is desert, anything to the east, and a lot of other areas as well. What is the greatest enemy to somebody who's in the desert? The what? Exposure. The sun. The sun kills more people in deserts than anything else by far. It dehydrates you. There's nothing you can do. Tarantulas are nothing. Animals are nothing compared to the burning heat of the sun as you're traversing a very dry, hot, low humidity area, which Jerusalem is, Israel is. So he says the sun, so he's saying, let me tell you what I will not allow happen to you. The sun shall not strike you by day, nor the moon by night. Now, if you remember what I said earlier about figures of speech and metonymy, he's not talking specifically about the sun, and obviously he's not talking specifically about the moon, because the moon doesn't really do that much damage to too many people. What's he talking about is the terrors of the day and the terrors of the night cannot harm you. Some things happen during the day. That's when most activity takes place. But by night is when most sin occurs, where there's most danger. And when you're walking in the daytime, you've got the problem of the sun burning you up and you're collapsing and dying. At night, you've got the problem of bandits and marauders and other things like that you can't see. So he's not really necessarily talking about the sun and the moon per se. And there's a lot of this comparative stuff going on. He's simply, in an all-inclusive way, saying he's not going to allow you to perish in the day. He's not going to allow you to perish in the dangers of the night. God is with you. I mean, everybody in this room, except for me and Reggie, probably get about 8 hours sleep a night. 8 hours where you have no control over what's happening to your life. And yet God has complete control over those hours that you're sleeping. Isn't that a comfort? There's people that can't sleep because they're so worried about what happens when they close their eyes. We don't have to worry about that. The keeper on the wall, the sentinel, is watching us during the day when we're having all of our activity and during the dark periods of the night when we have no control and when things very bad could happen to us. So we have, he's all powerful. How he keeps, he's able. He protects from grievous falls as they're tripping and going through these valleys and caverns and ravines. He's always awake. He's the perfect sentinel, and he always sees the big picture. He never allows the sun or the moon, the daylight or the darkness, in figurative sense, to harm us. You say, well, how do you know that's the right interpretation, Rick? I never heard that before. Well, maybe you haven't. Let me turn you back to Psalm 91 and just read something. I found this really interesting as a parallel. He's talking again, basically Psalm 91's got the same theme. It shall cover you with his feathers. Under his wings you shall take refuge. Something Jesus probably was thinking about when he was talking about Jerusalem, how often I would have taken you under my wings and so on. And then he says in verse 5, you shall not be afraid of the terror by night, nor of the arrow that flies by day. So he's using it the same way. The terror of the night, the dangers of the day, God has it all covered, Christian. Every last second of your existence, God is in absolute control last week, and his loving kindness is going to make sure that you are going to be fine. Not in a spoiled sense. Again, I want to keep emphasizing that, but in an ultimate sense. Genesis 31:40, it's Jacob again talking to his uncle and saying something about he was in the burning heat of the day and he was in the extreme cold of the night. So you've got dangers during the day, dangers during the life. Just have that say basically this, that your entire life is under the protection of a sovereign God who loves you. That you have to know that. You have to know that. This is aimed to comfort us. You say, well, you don't know my life. Yeah, of course I don't know, but you don't know mine. I mean, we're tripping, we're stumbling, we're falling, we're putting our foot in the ditch. With all this stuff going on, we're making bad decisions, whatever it might be. God is always watching over us. He's the perfect sentinel. Then verse 5, the ultimate goal. The Lord will keep you from all evil. Now again, that doesn't mean all bad things. He's talking in ultimacy here. The ultimate evil of you not making it to the desired haven. The ultimate evil of you forsaking the Lord. The ultimate evil of you saying, I don't want to do this anymore. I'll see you later, going apostate. He will keep you from all evil. If you love the Lord Jesus Christ, he is preserving you from apostasy. Now we see apostates. We've seen them. But what do we say about apostates? They never knew the Lord in the first place. That's an apostate. They acted like they did, the fake Christians. They went around uttering the name of Jesus and all that. But if you're a believer, he will keep you from all evil, and he will keep your life. Nephesh, you probably heard that word before. It means the life of the soul. He will keep your soul. I need to hear this. You know, the last year, I don't like the biographical. It's been tough. I mean, when you're slandered and you're basically excommunicated and you lose all your friends and so on. I'm so glad I got GCC. But anyway, but God is keeping my life. And that's so precious to me. Psalm 91 and verse 7. 1,000 may fall at your side and 10,000 at your right hand, but it shall not come near you. And I've seen them fall on the right, and I've seen them fall on the left. Why am I still here preaching the word, loving the saints? People know me, Reggie know me. I'm not a perfect man. I'm a mixed up man half the time. But God has kept me. Why? Because of Psalm 121. Got nothing to do with me. He works in me to will and to do of his good pleasure, of course. But that's God's work in me. God is working in you, saint. He will get you to the end. Please take that in. This sounds a lot like the priestly benediction in number 6. The Lord bless you. And by the way, this is one other place where this word keep is used in that sense. So Genesis 28, number 6. The Lord bless you and what? Keep you. That's what the benediction he would put, the priestly benediction on his people. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine upon you, turn his countenance toward you and give you peace, and so on and so forth. And then lastly, verse 8, the Lord will keep your going out and your coming in from this time forth evermore. It's just amazing how the psalmist was going to kind of say the same thing with all these different figures of speech. So as if you missed one, you're not going to miss all of them. The going out and the coming in referred to a man's leaving home in the morning to labor and coming in, returning at night. In other words, the going out and coming in speaks of all of our lives. We go out, we come back. We go out, we come back. The same expression is found in Deuteronomy, the 28th chapter, when God's giving, through Moses, the blessings to Israel. And notice what he says in chapter 28, verse 6. Blessed shall you be when you come in, and blessed shall you be when you go out. In other words, you'll be blessed all of your days. It's kind of like the sun and the moon thing, right? He's kind of getting at the same thing a different way. When you go out, you're going to be safe in God's hands. When you come home at night, you're going to be safe in God's hand. When you go to the game, you're going to be safe. When you come home from the game, you'll be safe. When you go on a trip, you'll be safe. When you come back home, you'll be safe. It's comprehensive. Psalm 104, verse 23 says, man goes out to his work and to his labor until the evening. For most of us, you're going out during the day and you're doing a lot of stuff. God is with you. You come home, God is with you. I think if all of us had an awareness of the Lord's watchful gaze upon our lives in each and every circumstance of the day, it would revolutionize the way we perform our duties. Because everything now is important to God if he's blessing us going out and he's blessing us coming in. Doing the dishes at home is as important as coaching basketball. Going out and fixing a house is as important as coming home and talking to your kids. It's all comprehensive. God wants the complete life, and us knowing that he is watching over every step of the way. Application. And by the way, it says from this time forth and evermore. That's comforting. There's no end to this. Even in New Jerusalem, God will still be watching and loving his people. What's the application? Well, we have a great protector. His name is Jesus. He's always watching out for us. He is intimately involved with our lives in every sense of the word. If you're a believer, know that. Well, I don't feel Jesus all the time. Yeah, of course not. But he's always with you. Believe what the Bible tells you. He will never leave you nor forsake you. Who is the keeper of Israel? Who is the keeper? We are the Israel now. We are walking to the eternal city. Who is our keeper? Who's going to get us to the end? Jesus Christ will get you to the end if you know him. Will you be discouraged? Of course. He will get you there. He's the keeper of Israel. And so I just submit to you this final of the 5 Psalms and just say, please, just soak this in. You are the Israelite now walking to the eternal city. We're not looking to mountains anymore. We're looking to one who sits at the right hand of the Father, who has conquered sin and death. And he now sits up. We're going up. We're seeing him upward. And we know that he is going to take care of us all the days of our lives. And so I close this 5-week series, which I'm sad. I've learned a lot. I got 145 Psalms to go. What a beautiful book. I just hope this whets your appetite for these songs. I just hope it whets your appetite. It's hard reading ancient poetry. I get that. Maybe I've helped you a little bit, maybe not, but labor at it. These are worth sucking all the nutrients out of these 150 songs. And they're very varied, as I said at the beginning. So I close with this. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine upon you and give you peace, and give you peace, and give you peace forever. May you be blessed today and all the days of your life. Amen.